AdLib is the DSP-agnostic buying platform to scale your programmatic campaigns smarter, faster, and more profitably. AdLib helps independent agencies and marketers deliver premium programmatic performance without the complexity, cost, or overhead of traditional DSPs. Their platform provides the tools, data, and automation to run enterprise-quality campaigns, from CTV and audio to geofencing and YouTube, all under one roof with zero trafficking headaches. Plus, they're not just a platform, they're your growth partner. The AdLib team helps you win new business, expand budgets, and deliver measurable ROI that keeps clients coming back. It's time to unlock programmatic. Join leading marketers worldwide who are using AdLib to deliver more campaigns with better results. Check out getadlib.com.
Hey guys, it's Eric. Before we get into this episode with Michael from Recast, which by the way, you're going to love, I want to just make a quick announcement. So as you know, I work at Imperium. We're a venture fund. We invest in early stage adtech and martech, and we are supporters of all things innovation and startups in adtech. So I got an idea for you. I got an opportunity for you. We are partnering with Possible, the event, also a portfolio company in Miami in April on a brand challenge. So if you are a startup, if you are a little bit of a scale up, I encourage you to go to possibleevent.com/2026-brand-challenge, or just type in brand challenge Possible into Google. It'll get you there. And submit. It's going to be an on-stage pitch competition. We're going to have 6 finalists. There's going to be a room full of, hopefully, decision makers and brands and influencers hearing the pitches, and we're going to choose a winner. So go to Possible, click on the 2026 brand challenge, submit for the competition. We want to see the best of the best out there, all types of solutions around measurement and CTV and commerce and all that good stuff, competing to see who will be the champion. If there are any questions, feel free to reach out. The deadline is Monday, March 23rd. So by the time we post this, that'll be about a week away. And again, encourage everybody to sign up for it. Thank you very much. And with that, we will get into the episode with Michael.
Welcome to Open Market, a podcast about building companies in the advertising industry. I'm Joe Zappa. I'm joined by Eric Franchi and our latest illustrious guest, Michael Kaminsky of Recast. How's it going, Michael?
It's going great. Thanks so much for having me.
Also, disclosure, Recast is an illustrious Sharp Pen client in addition to being an illustrious guest. So, we got that out of the way.
And Michael's calling in from Is this a radio show? Michael is coming in from the illustrious city of Mexico City, our first Mexico City guest.
It's a beautiful city, beautiful weather. Love it here.
Joe, what are we going to talk about today?
We're going to talk about marketing, measurement, entrepreneurship, and all those other fascinating things. So, Michael, we had an interesting back and forth before the episode where you mentioned that marketing analytics might be an even tougher space to start a company in than ad tech. I think some of our listeners might be struck by that. They might disagree with that. I don't know. But tell us your case for that in the context of starting Recast.
A longtime fan of the pod, and I was listening to the recent episode that y'all had where you were talking about sort of where ad tech fits in and how it sort of has a lot of people look askance at ad tech companies. And I thought it was funny because it's like marketing analytics, even worse somehow. Marketing analytics, interestingly, like not actually that tough to start a company. And I think there's like thousands of companies in the marketing analytics space. Very tough to make a very big, very successful company. And I'm happy to sort of talk about some of the dynamics as to why that is. But marketing analytics is, I think, generally reviled by investors. And again, probably for good reason, because you have all of these companies that have small to middling outcomes. And so we haven't ever really seen a company so far that has really been super successful in quote unquote marketing analytics, since Nielsen, which was founded, 75, 100 years ago, something like that. So it's an interesting space for me to be working in. I didn't know anything about this. When I started the company, I was like, this is an interesting problem. I want to go work on it. I wasn't thinking about market dynamics, but now that I'm in it, and have spoken to tons of investors and, has sort of been in the MarTech, ad tech sphere. I think there's a lot of really interesting dynamics that make it a really tough place to make a really big business, that a lot of people jump in with both feet and they're like, I have an idea for a new marketing dashboard. And they don't sort of realize exactly how hard it's going to be or some of the industry dynamics that make it really, really challenging to make a really big successful business.
And was part of the reasoning because you were a practitioner and you were looking for these tools and you're like, they're lacking in X, Y, or Z ways?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, my background is actually in sort of much more on the academic research side. So I started my career doing environmental economics research and research in like healthcare economics, clinical trial analysis. And so I've always been really interested in like statistics and how to use those statistics to like learn things about the world. And once I started learning about the problems in marketing and marketing measurement, I was like, oh, these are really fascinating, hard problems. It seems like we can do better than what the state of the art is. And so that was sort of just like the path that I started going on and started going down with my co-founder. And they are really fascinating, really hard problems, but that makes it really hard to start a business and really hard to start a successful business. And it's not only technological problems, right? There's also lots of political problems that come along with doing anything in the space of marketing measurement, where, you know, you have a lot of vested interests who have results that they want to see. Often, like, the best technical tool is not the one that wins within an organization. And so that makes it really challenging when you're trying to build a product in the space and you're like, well, we should build the best thing, but the best thing doesn't actually win. And so you have to think about like, okay, how are we actually going to navigate that when you have all of this political machination that surround the idea of marketing measurement and what actually works and what doesn't?
I was just like stumped by your, there hasn't been too many successful outcomes in marketing analytics. I was trying to play the historical game to see if Nielsen is the only example, or maybe the largest example. Would you consider
Moat was good. Moat was a good one. But again, that's like, I think they sold it for like 500, 600 million. So there's like Moat and market share.
A little north of it.
Yeah. I think it wasn't. I think it was like 850. So please pay your respects to Joan.
Yeah, I don't.
Amy's loved out the amazing outcome for that business.
Yeah, I don't mean to debate. You just kind of got me thinking. I do think there's a precedence of, you know, some of what used to be called maybe the marketing clouds, right? Like Adobe. I'm not sure. You know, I'd say that was is that marketing analytics?
Maybe, I think so. But again, it's like, these aren't these big, like, huge household names. So, right, we don't have Trade Desk. We don't have, you know, AppLovin, right? We don't have these like really huge outcomes. Even the best ones are still sub-billion-dollar outcomes, which, you know, from an investor perspective, just ends up not being that compelling.
Yeah, the way I think about it is they've been critical components of some things that have ended up being like incredible outcomes. You might think about maybe whatever Google Analytics, what that acquisition was and what it became and how it became part of the Google stack and the Omniture, the Experience Cloud and everything like that. I think it's a very valuable category, but it's maybe not a category that produces like a canonical standalone winner the way we might think about, to your point, like the TTD and AppLovin. But I think it's a very, very critical, like, important category that, you know, can create, I think, interesting winners together. Anyway, total sidebar since you started talking about outcomes.
Look, I mean, I obviously believe that this is like a really important space to be working in, and like, that's why I'm doing it. I've dedicated so many years of my life to it. But I think when you are in this space, you are really fighting an uphill battle, especially if you're looking to go down a venture-backed route, to really make a case for how is this thing actually going to be big. And without being able to plug into some other business, again, I think Recast is going to be that big outcome, right? But I think it's, you know, you have to really take that leap of faith and really be able to say like, hey, look, we're going to do something different than what's come before in order to be able to actually achieve that scale of outcome that we're looking to get.
Makes sense. And I think you underscored well with this back and forth, you know, some of the maybe the dynamics that make it a degree harder.
Yeah, I mean, and I like talking about this because I've been spending a lot of time thinking about like, why is this so hard? And I think, you know, marketing measurement is and has historically been very political. And when you look at what like a lot of the large size companies in the space, including Nielsen, including, you know, an analytic partners type business, a Kantar, a lot of what they do is consulting. And a lot of what the job is sort of telling people what they want to hear, right? When you think about like a lot of the traditional marketing measurement activity, it's sort of trying to like justify what a company is already doing. And it's really hard to push against that, to say like, hey, look, we're going to show you something that is different from what you already believe or different from what you want to hear. If you're a company that's been spending a lot of money on TV for the last 15 years, you have a lot of vested interest in continuing to do that. And data that shows that TV isn't really performing super well, like, sort of gets rejected out of hand. And that, I think, is one of the core problems with a lot of the players in this space, is that they don't fully appreciate that like political dynamic and how hard like just showing a dashboard that says, hey, this thing is good and this thing is bad, like doesn't actually get you very far because of those vested like political interests that will kill the report or reject it outright without a bunch of like services or consulting on top that helps to smooth the path towards making some change in a business.
So how do you navigate that in practice, Michael? Like you're selling this type of technology, right? So who do the stakeholders on the other end tend to be? And then how do you navigate that tension where it's like, you don't want to come in and be like, everything you've been doing is wrong, but you also want to show that you can drive incremental value, which means some of it has to be wrong and you have to be showing them the light a little bit.
Yeah. So I think this is exactly like the tension that we spend a lot of time thinking about in the business is like, how do you do exactly that? And, you know, I don't want to build a consulting business. Like I don't really want to be in that world. That is not particularly fun or compelling to me. And so we think about like, well, what's the product way to think about doing this? And one of the things that we focus on is just trying to find the right buyer, which is to say like who in the organization actually cares if marketing is like truly efficient and effective and what's working and what's not. And in, I think, really good organizations, that's the marketing team. They care a lot about like, hey, is this actually working or not? But not in every organization. In some organizations, it's the finance team, right? And they care about, you know, holding marketers accountable. And so we as a business, what we're often trying to do is like find the person who actually cares the most about, you know, real ROI in terms of like additional profit being added to the business, and then try to build a product that works for them. And so one of the things that we've been doing a lot of is really thinking about our tool or our product as something that sits in between marketing and finance. So it helps finance teams actually hold marketing teams accountable. And marketing teams don't always love that. And so we actually want to make sure that finance is a really important stakeholder in the measurement conversation, because they're the ones who they don't care about like going to Cannes every year or, you know, getting taken to the Knicks game by whatever like vendor ad platform person. And so that ends up being like a really interesting angle to try to think about of like, okay, what actually matters here for getting the organization. They don't have to love the results, right? But they need to like start doing something about it. And so you have to find the right owner in the business who actually cares about that, who cares about like getting that ROI, getting that additional profit for the business, and then focusing on building a tool for them.
It strikes me as the kind of sell where it's not just about what is their title, right? CMO, CFO, et cetera. It's about personality and like culture, right? Like, are they the type of person who like, are they a true seeker? You know, do they have sort of the humility to say, I expect that what you're going to tell me is half of what I've been doing is right and half of it is wrong or whatever. And I want to know the wrong things and see how to do it better. And then the other thing is like where they are in sort of their cycle with the company, right? It can be very hard to do this if you're like 2 years in. If you're finding like a CMO or whatever when they're like within their first 3 months in a role, I would imagine that would be like a relatively like good prospect for you, and that it's like they're coming in and looking at how things have been done and changing it anyway.
Yeah, change agents are great. Like new CMOs are often great for us. They're like willing to, I mean, often they're being brought in because the other stuff wasn't working. And so they like are primed for that. You know, but I will say that like a big part of our sales strategy is like turning people away. Like we have people come in and they're like, you know, it's very clear that they want this sort of relationship that they have with like analytic partners or Kantar, where it's very consulting heavy, very like smoothing over the results. And we're just like, we're not going to do that. That's not like part of our model. Another thing that we think about in the product is, you know, I talk about this a lot, this idea that like interesting insights have no value, right? Like there's like entertainment value of interesting insights, but that's worth like a couple of dollars generally for executives. What actually matters is making a change to what you're going to do. For an insight to actually be valuable, you have to like see it, and it has to spur action, something different than what you were going to do anyway, in order for it to create any value for the business. So that, I think, is the lens that we take, and we think about not just providing reporting or a dashboard or some like interesting data, but actually how do you see that through to some change and then evaluate if the change actually worked, right? You have to actually go and make a change to the business in order to get any value from marketing measurement at all. And so I think the really good products in the space, they actually spur that, and they are, you know, good at helping people evaluate, did this change to my marketing plan? Did this change to my advertising strategy actually yield some underlying profitable difference for the business or not? And that ends up being where the focus has to be if you want to create long-term sustainable value for, you know, for clients, for customers, for people who are actually using this tool.
So let's talk about that product consulting software people balance, because I think that's something that almost every ad tech and martech company navigates, is that it's not like pure software. Like there's some element of like account management or consulting. So what does that look like for you guys? And then in terms of the truth seeking, it strikes me that that would be a very important thing to inculcate culturally. Like you would need to really get your people to understand, like, no, we're going to tell the client the truth. Like, and sometimes that might be uncomfortable because your instinct might be, how do I paper this over and sort of make it look good and whatever. So yeah, how do you navigate first that balance and then second that cultural problem?
Yeah, so this is such an important question. So when I talk about like the history of marketing measurement, one of the things that I point out is that it's generally been filled with snake oil salesmen. One of the fundamental problems of marketing measurement is that there is no truth, right? We don't really know like what the true causal relationship is between any advertising that we do and profit on the other side. There's nowhere that you can go look up and say like, how much revenue did this TV ad truly drive? That question is fundamentally unanswerable. And because we work in an environment where we're trying to answer fundamentally unanswerable questions, it just like attracts a lot of charlatans and snake oil salesmen and people who will sort of make things up because there's no way to like hold them to account. And so that has been a very, very big problem in this industry basically forever. So when my co-founder Tom and I started the business, one of the things that we wrote down as our like core principle is like, we're never going to sell snake oil. We just have to like, by strength of will, never ever do that and build that deeply into our culture. Because once you go down that road and once you start going down that road, it's just a very slippery slope. Like once you lie to the client the first time or you fudge the number the first time, it's a lot easier to do it the second time. And then all of a sudden you're like totally divorced from reality and you end up in this world where, you know, the slide decks are just full of totally made up numbers. And so that's a big part of our culture. And we sort of talk about this idea of never selling snake oil a lot within our company. But from a product perspective, one of the ways that we battle against this is we just say like sunlight is the best disinfectant, right? The best way to prevent people from like fudging the numbers and putting their thumb on the scale is to make all of that stuff very visible. So when someone tries to put their thumb on the scale, it shows up in the platform in a very conspicuous way. When, you know, forecasts are failing, like when they're inaccurate, right? When a forecast isn't actually working very well, we want sirens to be going off so that people can see it. And so we think a lot about when we're building this platform, how do we not only like, you know, provide the most accurate numbers, which is good, but then also what are the guardrails that you put in place that disincentivize mucking around with the numbers to try to tell a certain story? Joe, you were exactly right. You like hit the nail on the head where it is often when you are doing some of the like client facing work, you're incentivized to want to like tell them what they want to hear, right? It's like this meeting that I am like sweating and stressing about is going to go so much easier if I just tell them what they want to hear. But that ends up being a huge problem. And so we want to build the product in such a way where like everyone ends up disincentivized to do that, to just tell people what they want to hear, because they know that like, look, the truth is going to come out and it's going to come out very soon. So it actually doesn't benefit me to like try to fudge the numbers or paper something over in the short term.
It strikes me as a interesting project, maybe a fun project for you, Joe. Because again, we said in the beginning, you guys have been working together with Recast as a Sharp Pen client. When you got this download from Michael about like state of the industry, I mean, very sort of like teed up very easily, you know, the enemies and the challenges. What was your thinking in terms of how to wrap this into something that is, you know, like I think interesting and differentiated and like easily kind of pitchable from the top down?
Well, I think what makes Recast fascinating from a narrative perspective is that they're actually at odds in a way with where a lot of the industry is heading, right? Like you genuinely go against the grain, right? So like we're in this sort of measurable outcomes era thing. And when I met with, you know, Michael and his team and sort of gave them my understanding of the lay of the land, in some ways they were like, yeah, that's right, in the sense that that's what people are talking about, but we actually want to go the other way. And I was like, great. You know, like a contrarian POV is in many ways better than becoming part of the chorus, right? It's naturally differentiated. And so I think where like Recast is often able to be effective is by doing exactly that. Like you say, yeah, we are in this sort of like outcome zero or whatever, but that leads to poor incentives where people are often selling certainty. And we are the people who defend the truth or defend uncertainty in the name of truth, right? And that is a powerful position from which to operate.
Yeah. And just to be clear, like, I think we are so laser focused on outcomes, right? But the one of the enemies that we see is false precision, right? Which is this idea, I think, if you are going to do the best thing for your company as a marketer, as an advertiser, often you have to accept a lot of uncertainty, where there's just like a lot of things that are really powerful, really impactful, really important, and cannot be measured with any amount of precision at all. And I think that, again, there's vendors everywhere who try to sell all of this precision of, oh, we're going to track every eyeball that sees this thing. And it's just like, is that actually getting us closer to the right decision? Or is it just stacking false precision on false precision on false precision? And that is one of the big problems that I see in the industry today, especially in like the marketing measurement outcomes piece. Is outcomes are super important. We should all recognize that, but we also need to accept like the limitations on measuring what actually matters when it comes to like driving true profitable performance over the long term.
I relate to it. It's certainly like very related to what I do, because like I do more like upper funnel marketing, right? Like comms stuff. Like tons of people are going to hear this podcast, and at some point they might be, you know, a Sharpen customer, Recast customer, or whatever. We are never going to know the full impact of that. We're never going to be able to connect all of the dots. And so part of being a sophisticated marketer is living in that uncertainty and sort of pricing it in. And I think, you know, that is the ideological position from which you guys build.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And when I look at like marketing measurement today, again, we do a lot of like brand upper funnel marketing. This podcast counts, like all of the other content that we produce counts. And again, I just know that like it's having an impact and it makes sense for us as a business strategically, but I'm never going to be able to like put a precise ROI on doing these activities. And I think, you know, a lot of marketers, especially that came up in the last 10 or 15 years, like they like got really excited about, you know, the power of attribution to like put an ROI on some specific ad. But I think that ends up leading people astray and sort of missing the forest for the trees. And really good advertisers, good marketing teams, they are like, they accept what is unmeasurable and they are still able to act and make decisions. And I think I see like analysis paralysis everywhere in the industry today, where people are like, oh, if I can't put a precise ROI on this particular activity, we're not going to do it because, and then they'll say like, because we're data driven. And I'm like, that's not actually being data driven, right? That's analysis paralysis, is being like tethered to your spreadsheet, when really you need to be thinking much more strategically about like what actually is possible. And even when you can't measure things or you can't measure things well, like what is the right long-term decision for the business?
Yeah, if you only do what's easily measurable, what's going to show up on your dashboard, then you've decided in advance which channels you're going to use, right? Regardless of how effective any of them are. You've just said these ones are more easily measurable, so they're the right ones, right? Which is not actually necessarily true for your business. To that end, are there common misconceptions you see where when you go into like a company's marketing program, you're like, oh, most companies spend too much on X or Y, maybe because it's easily measurable or for other reasons?
I don't know. I mean, we definitely see, or I see a whole mix, but I work with businesses across the full spectrum, you know, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies to like much, much, much smaller businesses. And so like the sorts of mistakes that people are making across that range, like they vary really, really widely. And it's hard to say. I think one of the things that I have learned in this business is that every business is different. Every business is different. Every marketing channel is different. And I guess a couple of things that I like to reinforce to people is that just because some marketing channel or some strategy works for your competitor doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And maybe it can work for you, but it's going to require a lot of effort and like learning to make it work. Just because someone else is having a really good luck on TikTok doesn't mean that you can just dump a bunch of money in and it's going to be successful. Like, you need to learn how to work with influencers, or maybe they have an influencer on their board or in the leadership of the company and you don't. And so it's like, you're in a totally different situation. You can't just copy and paste this stuff across brands and across different marketing channels or strategies. Like, it is so brand dependent and channel dependent. And like execution really matters. Creative quality really matters. Like making YouTube work as a channel is not just like, oh, I'm going to dump a prompt and then plaster this video all over YouTube. No, you have to be much more deliberate about that. And the businesses that are really good, I think they take that into account and they think really hard about the learning strategy and the testing strategy and iterating towards better performance over time, rather than just saying like, oh, the hot new trend is X, and so we're just going to dump a bunch of money there, which basically never works.
You mentioned the relationship between the CMO and the CFO. So this is something like adtech and martech CEOs have been talking to me about for a long time. I'm curious how it plays out in practice, by which I mean, like, what do you think that conversation looks like when it's productive?
Yeah. So I think when it's productive, it's a conversation about strategy and investment, right? CFOs love to think about investment, risk, and return profile. What is the risk of this investment? What is the time window over which we expect to see the return? How does that look? And how does that fit into our longer term business strategy? And I think marketing, when it's done well, you can convert everything that marketers are doing into something that maps into those buckets, right? We want to build a brand today so that we get, more efficiency and more organic purchases 2 years from now. Here's how much we would need to invest to do that. Here's the risk around that of what happens if it works, what happens if it doesn't work, how might we, think about what that range of potential outcomes is. And then, we can start to think about, hey, what's the net present value of investing in building the brand today versus building a new factory wherever tomorrow. And I think that that's totally reasonable. And I talk to a lot of finance people, and they are sort of dying to have this conversation with their marketing counterparts, where this is the conversation they want to have. They want to support marketing. They know that investing in a brand is good long-term for the business, but they get frustrated when they come into these meetings or, are preparing the board deck, and all they see is the number of impressions that we got last quarter or some change in our brand awareness metric, without actually being able to map that into financial discussions about, hey, what's the payback on this over the long term? And again, I think that, many, many cases, if CMOs go into the conversation, they say hey, look, here's what I believe strategically is going to happen. Here is what this return profile could look like. We're going to be very uncertain about this. It's a big risk, but this is how you can think about the return profile of it. A lot of CFOs will say okay, great, I get it. It's a big risk, but it makes sense as a risk that we are willing to take for a business. The business takes lots of risks across lots of different investments that they're making. It's totally reasonable for marketing to be one of them. But I think that, over the last number of years in a lot of organizations, the CMOs have gotten too divorced from being able to talk about how marketing activity maps into the high level business strategy and how that gets converted into an eventual profitable return over, whatever time period that they're investing in. And I think that you have to be able to have that conversation and have that conversation in an intelligent way in order to be able to operate the business and make the right decisions.
We talk about AI.
Love AI.
Cool. When did you start the business?
We started, it depends exactly on when you count. I think we maybe started whiteboarding. My co-founder and I started whiteboarding some ideas about 6 years ago. And then I think we were sort of in market 4.5 years ago, probably, is when we first launched.
Got it. Okay. So just before the AI wave started to hit.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, cool. So how are you using AI today as an entrepreneur? Maybe in terms of both how you run the business and how you're evolving the product base.
Yeah. So I'll say I was late to AI. Obviously, I was reading about it, but I think a year and a half ago, I was everybody was talking about ChatGPT and the different LLMs, and I couldn't find a good use case for it in my work. I write a lot, and I felt like the LLMs weren't the writing wasn't particularly good. I was I would never publish this.
Yeah, that's not then for sure.
Not then. And then, I was having them do some research for me, but I had all of the problems that everybody has talked about, right? It would hallucinate some things or it would miss some really important things. And so I was nah, this just doesn't I do not have a way to insert this into my work. That sort of changed a lot about 4 or 5 months ago when the coding agents really started exploding and started going from it's sort of like a junior intern to oh, this is actually really good. And so we've got the whole team using coding agents, and obviously that has really increased our pace of development and our ability to explore new features, new products, get them out to market. So that's really exciting. And then what we're really excited about for our business, and we sort of alluded to this at the beginning, where there's like, in the world of measurement, there's a lot of like sort of services and consulting that has to go along with the product. So our business is very much like software product with like light layer of sort of services and consulting on top. And LLM's ability to like take what I call like the worst part of our business, which is the services component, and make that much more efficient is incredibly powerful. It's not like one click, turn it on and it just works. Like there's a lot of work that goes into making the MCP servers work well, building out all of the evals to test that, these things are giving the correct answer to complicated questions consistently. But in the prototypes that we have been exploring right now of those tools, it really does look like it has the potential to like really change the economics of our business and our ability to deliver just like a really, really high quality product at scale in a way that absolutely was not possible even 12 months ago. I think, again, some visionaries maybe saw this coming clearer than I did, but now that we can like really touch it and feel it, it just seems so obvious that this is the way forward. And again, I have people like CMOs who are reaching out to us and they're like, hey, I want to get early access to the MCP server, because it's like the CMO is running Claude code. Like that is wild, right? If you think about how much the world is changing where the CMOs are running Claude code, like it's just the way that you can build products, the types of products that you can build now are so different than, again, what was possible 6 or 9 months ago. And so it's like a really exciting time to be in this business. But, I'm also spending a lot of time thinking about like what's actually defensible, right? If I can launch a new product myself in, with a month of Claude code, anybody can. And so how do you make products defensible, right? What is the like core part of the product that actually is not something that can be like slopped by all of your competitors in 2 weeks if you have something that's reasonably popular? And so I don't have any answers there, but we had a long debate internally with our leadership team the other week about like, okay, how do we think about this? What is the defensible parts? How do you build defensible products when like the software engineering cost goes to zero? So I don't know. It's like a terrifying, but also a really fun time to be an entrepreneur and a product builder.
What's your thinking around that specific to measurement in the age of AI? Where is the moat? Where's the defensibility?
So I think for us, the moat that we have is we have this like core IP that we have developed over the last N number of years around the specific like statistical model that powers our core product. For those of you, so we're in like the marketing mix modeling world. For those of you who aren't in that world, the way that you could think about it is that we have invested a ton of time and effort into developing a world model of how marketing works, right? Trying to think through all of the edge cases of how does TV relate to branded search and how does that drive sales? And that's really complicated once you sort of start getting into all of the details of how all of the pieces come together to go from marketing or advertising to sales at the end of the day. And that core IP that we have developed currently is not replicable via like Claude code. You can't slop code something like that. And so that for us is an interesting like defensible piece of the product that we have today. If we have that plus like services agents on top, that all of a sudden becomes very scalable and again, difficult to replicate for someone outside of our business without huge amounts of investment. So that for us is like the IP component I think is really interesting. Outside of that, obviously like the things that we're really interested in is starting to build up like data assets, right? Where you start to have large data assets and like network effects of every new user of the tool both contributes data and benefits from the data of everyone else. And so if you can build that sort of asset, that's the sort of thing that then becomes very difficult to compete with. And so we're spending a lot of time internally thinking about like, what is the product that has that sort of flywheel effect that we can build? Because again, I have a bunch of ideas for a bunch of great products, but they're all like, I know that I can Claude code them in a week. So can anyone else. And so like, why bother, right? Because it's just like, that's not going to be defensible. And so you have to, as a product builder, you have to start thinking today about, hey, how are we building products that are actually going to be defensible or are going to have these like data components or flywheel network components that are going to allow you to get a like consistent, sustained advantage over time? Because, and again, this is just like, it's a crazy new world to be in, but otherwise anybody else can sit down and Claude code, copy your app in weeks. And I think you absolutely have to be planning for that today.
Yeah, I think it becomes a key part of the messaging almost for any company is like, why can't you just vibe code this? Which is like some entrepreneurs might find extremely annoying, but it's just true because that is the question that everyone is facing. And it's not just startups. Like, I think part of the challenge like a trade desk is facing is people being like, your software is super complex. Is that actually a huge drawback for you now? Because people will just create, a big brand or agency might create their own media buying platform that is, way simpler to use.
Yeah, totally. And I think the dynamics are going to change so much in the industry, but I think there's a lot of advantage of having stripped down apps, right? So here's an interesting thought. We're now like way out of marketing measurement, but this is like fun, maybe more fun stuff to talk about. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is that in the future, well, here's the problem. The problem is that our product is really complex and we spend a lot of time trying to get the UI right for this very complex product. And what that means effectively is that the UI that we end up building isn't perfect for any of our customers. All of our customers would like a slightly different UI, but we sort of have to build the average, right? The thing that works the best for the greatest number. And it's sort of like it doesn't fit anyone perfectly. And that is bad, right? It's not great. It's not a great experience for anyone. But in the future, you don't have to actually make that trade-off anymore. A future version of Recast that I like to imagine is what if like Recast is just the IP and APIs, and every new customer that we gets their own UI that they build or we start for them, and then they construct and they tailor it to whatever like works best for them and their business and the workflows that matter to them. Like the UI stuff doesn't matter at all. The only thing that matters is all of the APIs that are powering it, and then the ability to construct the UI or the workflows that actually matter for your business. And again, like that's sort of a crazy way to think about like software being built when like in the past you like think about like, oh, I'm going to build a clickable prototype and that's the first thing. But actually like that is not the way that software is going to be built anymore, because we don't have to sacrifice like having the perfect experience for every different customer, because every different customer should be able to build their own experience on top of the APIs that are being provided. And so that is what like a SaaS vendor becomes at the end of the day, I think, is a set of APIs that work really well. And like, that's where all of the focus goes into making the underlying tools work really well so that every business can plug into them in whatever way makes sense for them.
I think that's a great place to land it.
Yeah, I was thinking the same. Well, thank you very much, Michael. Appreciate you coming on, educating the audience, dabbling in the light of uncertainty.
This was a blast. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Michael. It was great meeting you. This was an awesome conversation, and we will see you next week, everybody. Bye-bye.